Hello, and welcome back to the next episode of the SBDN podcast. And today we are shining the spotlight on the incredible Barbara Fountaine, the CEO and founder of Young Tongues, which is a global support network for younger people living with tongue cancer. And Young Tongues is also our SBDN's Charity of the Year. Barbara, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Cheryl. That's so sweet of you. Those kind words. You're making me blush.
Oh, you are very welcome. How are you?
I am very good. Very busy. Something that I hoped was just temporary and has now continued throughout the year, since setting up as a registered charity. But very grateful that I've got the privilege to do this work.
Amazing. So the charity is at the moment very small. Can you tell us, for those that don't know, a little bit about your lovely charity?
Of course. So the Young Tongues is a small registered charity in the UK that supports young tongue cancer patients across the world. And by young, we define 18 to 64, because 64 is still quite a young age to be diagnosed with tongue cancer. And so we do a host of different things. Our primary function is to support patients, which we do through our patient groups, peer support groups on our digital resources, and we operate on a global basis. So at the moment, we support more than 800 patients through our peer support groups. And we also have a podcast, we have virtual meetups, we have in-person meetups in the US, UK, Canada, and Switzerland at the moment, hoping that we have more areas to cover in the future. And and we're more and more expanding the services we deliver to encompass other areas of our charitable work. So support will always be the first and foremost thing that we do, but we also are quite active in campaigning and education. So education being educating primary healthcare professionals such as dentists, anyone who works in the dental industry, and GPs and primary healthcare professionals to educate that tongue cancer can affect young people and not just the traditional patient profile that we know as people who are elderly smokers, males, heavy drinkers. No, we've got this new patient group of a lot younger people coming forward, and unfortunately there's more and more of us, and I might have outed myself by saying us. I am one of them myself.
Yeah.
And we'll get into the origin story after. But the other thing we do is, in terms of campaigning, is we try our best to be part of campaigns that will improve the lives of young people with tongue cancer, which quite often is relevant for the entire cancer community. So we do that by partnering with lots of other charities, in forms of associations, in forms of, collaborative work. And just at the moment, for example, we have co-signed a letter that was spearheaded by Young People versus Cancer to our health secretary to protect PIP for young people, well, for people with cancer, full stop. So we're always doing our best to kind of champion the patient voice. Speaking of patient voice, the other thing we do is we work with clinicians and with researchers. Clinicians primarily in terms of secondary care to look at what is best practice and what does best practice mean in terms of supporting a young person with tongue cancer versus someone from the elderly patient population. And one of the things that we observe in our communities are trends, and it's also how geography plays a huge role in what kind of treatment and what kind of support you are offered. And, if we look at this through a UK lens, even within the UK and within England and within Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, there are huge discrepancies in the type of experiences that patients have. So it's leading that conversation, but because we have a global community, we lead those conversations on a global
Yeah.
scale, which is really exciting. And the other thing we do is we are trying to work with researchers. So, and that is to not just to provide PPIE services, but to make sure the patient voice is heard in every piece of research, but also to help steer research priorities, whatever that may be, from, you know, managing side effects to finding cures to asking the age old question of why this is happening to young people. So it's working in collaboration with the scientific community, and also looking to gather information and data ourselves, which is missing in mainstream data. So we're trying to bridge many gaps. I think is the right. I should have just led with that. We bridge many gaps.
Barbara, you sound like an absolute powerhouse. Like, my goodness, I can really sense your passion for this charity. If you don't mind, can you just take us back to your story? You know, the birth of Young Tongues, and where that passion comes from, because I'm feeling it.
I'm glad you do. Yes, let's go back to the beginning. Let's all chill and figure out where this came from. So basically, I was diagnosed with tongue cancer aged 32 in 2019 here in Norwich, where I live, at the Norfolk Norwich Hospital. Like so many, it was a total shock, completely unexpected. Actually, I was told during the biopsy that it definitely wasn't cancer, which, you know, shouldn't have really happened, but which meant that at diagnosis it was an even bigger shock, because I didn't even know cancer was on the menu, much to my surgeon's surprise, who was a bit like, did you not realize were you here? And I'm like, no. Yeah. And like so many others, I had never heard of tongue cancer. I'd never heard of oral cancer or head and neck cancer. So the whole clusters of different cancers that can happen in that area. And
what were your symptoms?
my symptoms was a simple ulcer. A simple ulcer which appeared at the beginning of October 2018, that is. And I had just gotten engaged. So I was freshly engaged, and I just thought it was a bit of the jitters, a bit of stress.
Yeah.
And didn't think much of it. And then it persisted, and I went to the pharmacist. So I'm actually a really good example of how things should turn out. So I had the ulcer a couple of weeks at least, and it was bothering me. I mentioned it to my husband. Husband went, go and see someone, stop moaning about it. So I did, went to see a pharmacist. She gave me some gels, then went back a week, I think actually a couple of weeks later, because I was traveling for work a lot. And she was like, what, it's still not gone? I'm like, no. She's like, right, you need to go and see your dentist now, which I did. The dentist looked at it, wasn't concerned, said, look, I can see your teeth are sort of rubbing against it, which is probably hindering it from healing. So let's shave your teeth back a bit. But, and this is most importantly, he didn't just send me off on my merry way. He booked me in for a follow-up appointment.
Amazing.
Yeah. So again, I have to admit, I'm hazy now on the exact timeline, maybe 1 or 2 weeks. I went back again, and he was like, this is strange. And I think we had, so that another follow-up appointment. So he did a little bit more of filing back. And then on the third visit, he was like, right, no. And I think it was my description of it as well. It's like, you know, and I must admit, if it wasn't for this little detail, I might have not continued to go back, because it wasn't very pleasant. But I had lost a load of weight on purpose, I should say. I had worked very hard to lose weight. And but one thing that I would give myself as a little gift is, and I have to admit, I'm Swiss, so chocolate is an incredibly important aspect of my life. And I would have one of those Lindor balls.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, like, you know, now and again.
The best.
And that was like my thing. And it burnt. And I was outraged by that. I get outraged by food quite often. So I was like, this is not fair. There is no
Yeah.
way I can live without this. And it was that description that made him sort of look at me thinking, oh, this is strange. And he referred me to the hospital.
Yeah.
But very clearly stated, look, he said, like, I don't think this is anything. I'm referring you because it's best practice. That's what the guide is telling me to do.
Yeah.
And he's just, oh yeah, and he was really apologetic about having to refer me, and I was like, yeah, that's fine. I want to figure out what this is.
Yeah.
So then in hospital, I met with, I think now I know them as ENTs, who sort of, and you know, various levels of low, maybe not seniority, low seniority. And again, I think that I had at least 3 appointments with them, and they kept looking at it and then monitoring it before they were, again, very apologetically saying, look, we feel we need to biopsy this. Don't worry, it's probably nothing. And the word cancer was never mentioned. So I guess I was really naive. I never necessarily combined the words biopsy with cancer. They just said, look, there's a whole smorgasbord of different immune things, infections that it could be. And I was like, yeah, okay, cool. Came back for the biopsy and was in for a total shock.
Wow.
Yeah. So the information provided about the biopsy, yeah, I think we can improve on. We're working on that. But ultimately I had my biopsy, and the person who was taking the biopsy said whilst I was laying there, oh, this is definitely not cancer. I can see it's your teeth rubbing. And that was the first time I heard the word cancer. So I kind of thought, well, that's good news. So I then contended with the effects of the biopsy, which for anyone who doesn't know, probably everyone listening does know, it's incredibly painful because of where it is. And also, in my opinion, and I think I can say my community's opinion, isn't treated with the respect and pain medication it really should. I know a lot of healthcare professionals get really twitchy about opioids and heavy painkillers, and you know, it's not, and I fully agree, it's not a chronic pain, but it is an incredibly it's an incredibly intense, short-lived pain, but actually it's an intense pain that can impact your mental health, which it has done for me, which is a consequence I've been living with ever since, no matter if I had cancer or not. And I think what I'm actually really aggrieved about is the words used by healthcare professionals to describe the pain, but also the literature. Things like this is, you know, soreness, pain, you know, a bit of pain. It's always minimizing it. So what I did when I was screaming my head off for 24 hours, which is what happened, it was very traumatic for my partner as well, who had no idea. And later on, reflecting on it, I just really felt inadequate. I really felt like, oh my God, you know, there must be something wrong with me.
Yeah.
And that's the power of community. You suddenly realize that you're not the only one having that experience. And I'm suddenly realizing, hold on a minute. All of us have gone through this quite traumatic experience before we were diagnosed, which could be managed better.
It's the whole journey, isn't it?
It's the whole journey. So better communication, better pain management. You know, you don't need to prescribe me a big bottle of morphine or a morph. I don't need that. I just need a little bit to help me get through that 24, 48 hour period. And then after that, it is sore. It's not delightful, but it will get better, but it's manageable.
So and it's reassurance for you as well, isn't it? Like, this is going to happen. It's going to be really, like, be honest.
Yeah, it's reassurance. But I also understand that it's a very difficult balancing act, because you don't want to put people off before they are in your chair, because it is important to have the biopsy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we could just make the whole experience better by providing better pain medication, whatever the drug is, because I'm not a clinical expert to tell you what the drug is, because I understand neural pathways and nerves work differently. But nonetheless, if you're able to cut out a quarter of my tongue relatively painless, then the biopsy should not be
And the
quite that
mouth
extreme.
is such a private, sensitive area, isn't it? I know when we see patients every day, and having people in your mouth,
yes,
it's a very private thing. So we have to be as honest as we can. Whether it be we're doing fillings or removing a tooth. You're honest.
It's very
about what to expect from each appointment.
Absolutely, and it's very intrusive. The hands are very close to your eyes. Which, even though your head might be hovering above us, the rest of your body is very close to us and close to our eyes. So you can feel that. And the other thing I was going to say, that the one thing that really helped me, because I did eventually go and see my GP a couple of days later, because I just thought, am I going insane? What is happening? I honestly felt I was losing my mind, but also just like the after, and I was worried that they'd done damage that they shouldn't have. So, and bless her, she took time. It was the end of the day on a Friday, just before Christmas, and she sat me down and she said, look, I want to explain to you. And there's this fantastic thing called I'm going to butcher this pronouncement, but it's called the homunculus. Maybe it's pronounced like that, maybe not. But if you if you Google it, you'll find this image, and quite often there's a male image, but there's a female equivalent, and it shows basically how we feel sensitivity by ratio of the body percentage. So there's this like little tiny squashed person with really massive hands, fingers, big toes. In case of a male, a very big penis. But the biggest part of all of that is the tongue.
Wow.
And she was like, if you look at this, if we take the same amount of tissue from your belly, it's not going to hurt. But because your tongue is so sensitive, and that visualization of explaining the pain to me, I was like, oh, that's why it feels like such a big deal. And it really calmed me. And I don't know if my GP at that point knew if I had cancer or not. I always wonder that, because I wonder, she took a lot of time with me. But and then, like I said, so this was just before Christmas. We went into the Christmas period. By Christmas Day, thankfully, I was able to eat my turkey lunch. And then we had a follow-up appointment scheduled already before the biopsy. This was scheduled for New Year's Eve, out of all days. And I have to admit, by then, we were super relaxed, me and my husband, and also my parents had just been over from Switzerland to have Christmas with us, and they were, once I had that explanation with the pain, and they were also relaxed. I was actually more peed off with the fact that I had a biopsy, thinking I didn't need one, because I thought, God, you'd put me through an awful lot. Hindsight, hey. But then, we sat in the waiting room. We had to wait quite a long time. We fell asleep.
God.
It was an hour and a bit. It is like peak post Christmas. And there was lots of other patients there. So, but honestly, we just really didn't feel worried at all. And then we got called in, and the mood changed very quickly. So we got called in, and I think the first thing that should have given it away was the amount of people in the room.
Oh, wow.
But I didn't register that. My husband did. I didn't. And I sat down. I sort of looked around. Everyone looked quite serious. And
that face.
But again, I was still up until that point. Like, I was still none the wiser. And the surgeon started with asking me lots of questions about how I noticed this ulcer, what inspired me to go and see a dentist, da, 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 da. And I honestly, at this point in my head, was thinking, oh my God, they're going to tell me I'm a huge hypochondriac. And these people are here from a mental health assessment. Like, and I'm not even joking. That what was going through my head.
Oh,
And he
bless
just
you.
finished stuff going like, and I explained why I did, and he just said, "Well, it's really good that you did,
He
because
saved your life.
yeah." He said, like, you have cancer, and then I went, "What? I have what?" And he's like, and that's when he was like realized the communication disparity, because he sort of thought. Yeah, and he could. I think he could see in my face, especially my husband's face, because I remember looking at his face and going, "Wow, this has completely blindsided us."
Yeah.
And he's like, no,
It's
no.
huge.
And he explained to me that they don't see many patients present that early, which is why he was so interested to find out
Yeah.
how I ended up on that my pathway, my patient pathway, to see him that early. And yeah, and you know, I remember fragments of that appointment. The most sort of memorable thing I remember is the look on my husband's face. You know, we were sitting there newly engaged, our life, we had plans, we had the venue, we had the date. And I always describe it as shattered glass. Like his face looked like shattered glass, like someone had just taken a baseball bat to his life.
Everything
And
literally
everything
changed in that minute.
in that moment. Weirdly enough, my reaction as a patient was very different. I was an event manager by trade. I, at the time, had my own small business, one-woman business. And I was like, okay, I'm meant to be in Germany in 2 days for a show. Can I still go? Do you want me to stay? Like, what is the plan? And they were like, yeah,
What do I do?
yeah, because obviously I knew surgery, like whatever the treatment wasn't going to be imminent, like straight away. But I was advised, you know what, this is a big piece of news. Maybe you should stay in the country. Also, we want to do all these tests on you. NHS being overwhelmed. It's winter, so whenever we can slot you in, we need you to be ready to come, so we don't delay anything. And I understood that quite quickly. But I found it really interesting looking back now, because you always wonder, how do you react when adversity hits you? And I very quickly just went, okay, right, understood. What do we do about it, and how do we do it, and what do I need to do? What's the timelines? Da 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 da. So there wasn't much emotion from me at all. And then the other piece of very good practice I find, that I just want to, applaud, was before I left, I got introduced to my Macmillan nurse, who sat me down in another room, who brought me a cup of tea. And it was the moment her hand touched my shoulder that I went, oh, this is happening to me. This is what happens on the advert. This is what happens to me. This is happening. So I went from like triaging a motor accident to going, oh, this is reality. Okay, let's take a moment. It's real. And then after that, obviously had to break the news, had to manage some things. And in terms of treatment, I'm just going to wrap up. I was really lucky. I had stage 1, which we didn't know at the time, but I had stage 1. It was called really early. You had really good prognosis. So tongue cancer, stage 1, you have a 90% survival rate, which is amazing. However, what I didn't realize is that most of my peers don't get seen until they're stage 3 or 4, and that survival rate massively declines down to 50% and less. So
why do you think that? Do you think it's because it's just an ulcer, it progresses, and they didn't have the pathway that you did?
So why the delays? Okay, the delays for young people are easy. we don't fit the patient profile.
Okay.
So I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of horror stories in my community. And I mean horror stories of people being dismissed by their primary healthcare professionals, not by just one single healthcare professional, but systematically. So I went to see 2 dentists, 3 GPs, and in the end, they present either in A&E or they present because they are having another medical issue, and then they're saying, hey, actually I've not been able to eat for 3 weeks because I've got this really big thing in my mouth, and the secondary physician will look at it and go, oh my god. So that is the single most, in my opinion, I can't back this up by data, but in my opinion and observation, the single most driving force of delayed diagnosis is there's a barrier of referring people for biopsies because we don't fit the patient profile. And I found it really interesting as well that sometimes, because I ask a lot of questions and for a lot of details, and sometimes you get a real difference between, it's that anecdotal thing of saying, oh yeah, and then I saw someone younger and they straight away like put me through. And I was like, oh, maybe it's like that old patient profile we all have in our head of what a tongue cancer, oral cancer, or head and neck cancer patient looks like as a clinician. So yeah, as a community, we are there to basically remind people that this affects young people as well, and we need to find better ways of getting a faster diagnosis. Oh, actually, I now even changed my tune. We need a better way to diagnose, full stop. But that's a whole different thing. So, but the big difference between catching it early versus later is my treatment was invasive. It was a big deal. I had a 12-hour surgery. I had a quarter of my tongue removed. I had lymph nodes removed and glands removed out of my neck. I then had a piece of my arm removed, which they call a free forearm flap, to reconstruct the tongue. And I then had a skin removed from my leg to cover up the arm. And the impact is not just orally, it also impacts my back because there is I don't actually know if it's a nerve or something that runs all the way down, which they said they could nip, which they said it's incredibly unlikely we won't nip it, basically. So also I have sort of pains behind the back of my shoulder, which is really common in our community to have those things. Right. Yeah, but that is like the best case scenario,
Barbara, that's a lot.
It is a lot, but it's the best case scenario because the next step up is radiation or chemo radiation in combination. And having now had this project going for 4 years, I really understand how lucky I was, because radiation and chemo radiation in combination has such a detrimental long-term impact on the rest of your life. Plus, it is totally brutal to get through. Like, absolutely, like unfair. So unfair why you would do this to a human being. It's really, really brutal. I was lucky and unlucky, and I'm still touching wood. I did have spread into one single lymph node, which is where it usually goes first. And I was one of those patients. So if it goes into 2 lymph nodes, you have radiation, no questions asked. If you have it in one, you have to make the decision. So I had, I had a surgeon versus oncologist, one arguing one side, one arguing, like good cop, bad cop scenario. And then giving me enough information from both points of view to then allow me to make the decision, which at the time I didn't not thank them for, but retrospective, I am incredibly grateful that I got to make that decision. Because I decided not to have radiation and roll the dice, mostly due to the fact that I don't have children. I've had a very good innings. So I always said, I'm willing to take the higher risk option. I was closely monitored for 5 years, and it looks so far, that's why I'm touching wood, that I've
Gosh.
made that I've made the right choice. But it was like 50-50, because I also knew if there was something left over, it would be way harder to treat, and they would have to treat it a lot more aggressively, and
Right.
the prognosis was not going to be as good as if you had radiation there and then.
Yeah.
But even that decision making is way more complicated and nuanced, and again, with everything that I've learned over the 4 years, having seen many of my peers have recurrences, either having had radiation chemo, not having had radiation chemo, it is way more complex than just saying, you get to point B, now turn left and then turn right.
Yeah.
It's really complicated.
But it's great you had that information from different people from yes, no. You were actually given that information to be able to make an informed choice of your own.
Yeah, as informed as I could at the time. But the thing that really was missing at the time was I didn't know a single other young person with tongue cancer.
Right.
So I was very much flying blind. And at the time in 2019, if you Googled anything, any sort of studies, it's always based on the entire patient population. It's not based on young people. And I guess I'm inherently quite a positive person. So when I was looking at recurrent stats and chances of survival, I always said to myself, yeah, but this includes a whole load of really old people who have all sorts of other health conditions or might be frail or vulnerable and other things, where I'm in my early 30s, I'm as fit as I've ever been. So I always felt like, okay, even if it does come back, I hope that I have quite a good chance. Where, of course, with hindsight and with all the different experiences that I've had over the last 4 years, I can't tell you that I would still feel the same or make the same decisions even. But nonetheless, at the time, that was the best resource available to me. Yeah, and when you're in that position...
Since then?
Yeah.
It's not that long ago, not really, is it? Like, not really.
No. So for me personally, well, now it's all different anyhow, because immunotherapy is a lot more accessible than what it was. Beyond that, there are many other trials happening. So it's different. However, one of the things I have learned is, or observed, is that when it comes back with a force, and it's very rarely ends well. So I actually, it's really sad, but it's also because we don't have many options. With other cancers, you have like an entire list of different chemos you can try. With tongue cancer, and then where tongue cancer goes, because it doesn't stay in the tongue, and it can go into lots of different directions. It just makes it incredibly hard to treat. So, and you are really reliant on having a really good team that does patient-centered care. And that really takes you as an individual, and is also really up to date on all the newest evolutions of oncology care, which is really difficult. And I mean, I'm lucky because I'm at the Norfolk and Norwich. It's quite a big hospital. It's a university hospital. I count myself very, very lucky by the people who treated me and cared for me. But there are other parts in our country, England, which doesn't have the same access to that type of expertise. And that's scary. That would be scary for anyone and everyone.
Yeah. But you'd have thought by now that everybody would join together with all this information, that everyone would be singing from the same hymn sheet, no?
Well, naively said yes, but with what I've had the privilege to learn over the last years, having had more contact with clinical and researchers, it's not black and white. Nothing is black and white. And actually, the experts disagree with each other as well. So
that's what you're up against, isn't it?
yeah, and I think one of the things, one thing that I'm personally really keen on is when we look at research and data and stuff, is to make sure that the patient voice has been included. And that starts at the very beginning of a study of how it's designed and what questions it's trying to answer. And the other thing that drives me nuts, especially in this country, is the poor access to good data. And that some data just plainly doesn't exist. So I can give you a tangible example here. Like I said, I anecdotally feel that the biggest contributor to delayed diagnosis is not getting the referrals either in dental or GP settings. Now, GP, we have a little crumbs of data. It's not very good, but there's some crumbs available. But there is no link up with NHS dentistry or private dentistry. So the one thing I'm keen to find out, because we talk about treatment delays, but that starts counting from the moment you were diagnosed to the moment you have your treatment. But I'm saying, no, I have a community of people who are already delayed before they get diagnosed. So they're facing a much, even a bigger uphill battle in terms of getting their treatment on time. Because what we are not, what data we don't have access to is how many times has an individual seen a dentist or a GP or another healthcare professional before they got their referral. And that data, unfortunately, is just not available. And there are reasons for it. I don't think they're good enough reasons, but there are tech issue reasons why that data isn't easily accessible. But again, like I said, I mean, that's where we need policymakers.
Well, yeah, because you'd have thought, like, whether it be a NHS dentist or a private dentist, those referrals are still sent to the hospital, aren't they?
Yes,
which would be the start of
the referral, yes, but no dentist will tell you how many times they've seen that patient before they gave the referral. Or also, we have some patients that end up going to see several different dentists because their usual dentist doesn't believe them. That sounds really harsh, but doesn't hear them, doesn't see it, and doesn't give them a referral. Or the other big thing, an awful lot of people don't have a dentist. At the moment, as a huge problem. So they end up going to a GP. A GP prescribes them stuff against thrush and a really long list of antibiotics, which also really drives delays. We have a lot of stories like that as well. And unfortunately, even it seems the NICE guidance is clear, maybe it's not clear enough. So maybe we need to add more nuances in terms of, what the patient population looks like and how it's evolved, and when they need to send people for referrals. But then on the flip side, I can tell you, and I only know this because I interviewed someone the other week who deals like with the other side of it. So did you know that 90% of all biopsies are not cancerous? 90%, right? So that's a really, actually quite a huge error, percentage. But then you have communities like mine that are screaming and saying we're not getting referred quick enough. But then you also have like a healthcare system that is so overworked and overwhelmed, and a pathology department who can't keep up with all the referrals coming through and all the biopsies having to be looked at. And then actually the people who really need the diagnosis fast are within that 100%, and 90% actually. So there is a real challenge here. And I am pleased to let people know, because it's not all doom and gloom, that there are some really, really interesting projects happening that are looking at that entire diagnosis pathway, and even how we do diagnoses. If all things go well, I'm hoping Young Tongues will play quite a role in that. So
It's conversations all round, isn't it? It's the whole communication from everybody. I know in our dental practice that I work in, we do offer free soft tissue examinations. And we'll always say to patients, if you have a lump, a spot, anything like that in your mouth or on your face that hasn't gone within 3 weeks, come back and see us.
Yeah.
Tell that to your friends, and just highlighting it all the time.
Yeah.
And if everybody was communicating like that, it would help a small,
absolutely,
even if it's just one person.
And I think that's the 3-week mark is like a really good tool. It's a really good communication tool for us because it's really specific in terms of what people should look out for. Now, listeners might have noticed that I never have mentioned that we raise awareness in the population. That's because we've chosen not to. So, mostly because there are already several incredibly great charities here in the UK and beyond. And I'm shouting out to the Mouth Cancer Foundation, especially, who raise super awareness in the public about different oral cancers. And there's also head and neck cancer charities who do the same for the whole head and neck. And there's one scheme that I'm really hoping the government's going to invest more money in. So Asda's got on their own brand toothpaste.
I've seen this.
Yes, and I think in terms of being able to tap into the general population of what oral cancers are, I think that's a really good tool. Wouldn't it be great if there was some piece of legislation that would need every oral health product to have that on it, right? No matter if it's as their own brand or a branded thing, to have something on there. So some sort of symbol that comes into people's minds and go, oh yeah, there is such a thing as oral cancer. And we need to remind ourselves in the UK as well that the forecast is dire. This is not a problem that's getting better. This is a problem that's getting worse. And us, young people, we are a minority within that bigger problem. So that's why we kind of lean on those established charities who are already doing this great work. What we're interested in as a community is very much shining a light on our niche community. A little bit being the canary in the coal mine, because statistically speaking, data driven, I can't tell you how much this disease is increasing in the younger patient population. Anecdotally, I'm seeing it in our support group, but is that because we're the first ever support group for young tongue cancer patients to exist? Is that why we're seeing such a big uptake, much more than we were expected? Also, when we speak to oncologists and surgeons, they're saying we're seeing a lot more younger people. What I find really interesting is when I go to symposiums, like research symposiums, a lot of people put down the increase of younger people with head and neck cancers down to HPV. And I kind of have to go, yes, but that is true for oropharyngeal cancer and throat cancer, amongst other cancer groups in the body, but not for cavity tongue cancer. Because 90% of cavity tongue cancer, or nearly 90%, please don't quote me on that number, but a big majority of people with cavity tongue cancer are HPV negative. And that's another thing that echoes, the patient's frustration of going, oh, people assume I have this because I've got HPV, but actually I'm HPV negative. And I can't see any other literature that could indicate why we are getting this. And unfortunately, that's a true fact. So as much as we want to support HPV awareness and especially vaccine uptake, again, we don't focus on that. It's other charities do a fantastic job at doing campaigning for that. For us, it's tapping the researcher on the shoulder and going, don't forget about us. And also, wouldn't it, for us as an organization, we would love to have access to data that we can conclusively say and see, hey, look, over the last 10 years, there has been a steady increase of people Yeah, like maybe let's say up to 45, because in scientific research, they like to have a young person up to 45. So there's like a steady increase of younger people getting this HPV negative tongue cancer. And then we don't want it just for the UK. We also want it for, on the global scale. But yeah, that's on my wish list of many things I would like to have.
I'm scared.
Yeah.
She's coming for you.
So as an organization, as a brand new fledgling organization, so I didn't explain that earlier. So I said we've been going for 4 years. I started it as a hobby because I wanted to meet other young people with tongue cancer during the pandemic. And also having been told that it's very unlikely that I'll meet someone my age, because this was really, really rare. Oh, little did I know. But through Instagram, I sort of connected with some people in America, and then this whole Zoom thing came up and was new, and I said, hey, shall we just get on a Zoom call? So it started off with 12 people in a Zoom call, and it was like the most wholesome, healing experience that I could have imagined, because we were all showing our scars into the cameras. We were all showing our tongues. And, oh, you got this, you got that. And we were talking about, we're talking about the biopsy, and we're all going, oh my God, and the treatment. And there were tears, there was laughter, there was real heartbreak, but it was the most real thing that I had encountered, yet it was taking place on a digital platform. It was amazing. And I went to bed that night and I just been like, right, Young Tongues, we need to do something. That's where the name came. And and the next day I registered the URL and set up the Facebook group, and I just
literally the next morning.
Yeah. When I get inspired, I'm off. And then I honestly thought this was going to be a hobby. I thought there's going to be, maybe 10, 20, 30 people. Hey, within 6 weeks, we had 100 people in the group.
Wow, that's amazing.
And it was incredible. And the vibe was good. There wasn't any. I very early introduced like some community guidelines in terms of like, we're not doctors here. Let's exchange like experiences, but let's not be diagnoses.
Friends.
And let's keep things like, let's keep this space like a safe space where you can vent. We can tell people how shit this experience is and how like frustrated you are. But
let's it can be quite isolating, can't it? I mean,
really
especially
isolating
through the COVID times as well, like even more so.
Yeah, and I said, but also let's then make sure that we lift someone up in the comments, not that it becomes like this spiral of doom. And just in general, I found everyone was like, came with such a positive attitude and such kindness to share and to be vulnerable and to really share an awful lot of information about themselves to people they've never met. And that sort of ethos has continued as we've now grown to 800 people. That's difficult to keep that community vibe going. And I'm just very, very blessed that for some reason we just keep having incredibly nice people getting diagnosed with tongue cancer, which is an awful thing to say, but so that's how we started. Now I've totally forgotten where I started with this thought. As you can see, my brain is constantly.
I'm just like mind blown by you, Barbara. Like you're like a superwoman. So this charity, took off. You had from one Zoom call, you literally shot it off into space, and what's your vision for it? Where is your vision? Where do you want this charity to go? Like your 5-year plan?
My 5-year plan. So for everyone listening, we've just finished our full first tax year, so to speak, our full registered year. So we're just doing our annual report at the moment, looking back at what we've achieved, but now we're looking forward. And for me, what I want to do is grow an organization that has a global status. I want to make sure that no other young tongue cancer patient is alone and has to go through this experience in isolation. I want to continue to grow our community and keep it with the same ethos as what it has now, in being kind and supportive and uplifting, whilst also being a safe space where you can say the things that you quite frankly can't say in front of your family or your loved ones. And I wanted to improve the lives of people who have been diagnosed with this disease. I also wanted to be more ambitious than that. I want our mission to be to improve the circumstances and the lives of the future generations of young tongue cancer patients. And for that, we need to take a multi-pronged approach. So in the short term, we have two big projects that I want us to do. Well, I say short term. I have two big projects that I want us to achieve. And the first one is the website we have at the moment. For anyone who goes to look at it, I apologize. I built that with MailChimp on no money, and it does what it has to do, but it's not very nice. But what I really want to do is to build a patient hub on the website, because I believe in our community groups, we have so much intelligence in there. We have so much wisdom in there, but we also have so much information in there that is not available in clinical literature. So I want to have the community engaged in creating this. And by community, and I don't just mean the patients and the carers, I also mean the clinical professionals and the researchers. So at the moment, I'm thinking out a methodology on how we can do this. But the idea is that it comes from a patient point of view. The patients, we've already sort of did some headings, and we came to 300 different topics without really thinking about it heavily. So there's so much there, but we just want so it would be great if patients got involved, picked a topic, researched what's already in the group, which we can show them how to do it, add their own voice, do a bit of desk research, put the sources. Then we probably have a middle person who does a bit of the copywriting. But then what we need, because we need to make sure that any patient information is safe, we need clinicians and researchers to come on board to fact check, proof, and make sure everything is medically sound, especially the stuff that isn't already in medical literature. And then I guess you could build this once you have the patient hub, which will be an ongoing project because there will always be more things to add. There's also, we're catering to a global audience. So things like in America will be different to the UK, and having all these nuances. So straight away, you're looking at a project that could take 10 years, right? And cost a lot of money. Nonetheless, I think there's a lot of value in that. And I also feel like we could then turn that on its head and actually produce resources for clinicians who might come across their first young person and might ask themselves, how do we support someone going through treatment, but also the long-term stuff, all the stuff we never talk about in a diagnosis room.
From start to finish.
Well, the finish is being death, right? And hopefully death being 30, 40, 50, 60 years out. But what happens in those 30, 40, 50 years out when you've had radiation in your 20s? How do you keep your teeth? How do you keep your nutrition? How do you keep your health? What mental support do you need? And, there's just so much to unpack there. So that being one thing. The one project. And the second project is actually even more ambitious and is absolutely bonkers.
I love this so much.
So we're calling it the Young Tongues Patient Platform. And basically, because I get so frustrated with data, I say there are so many data points, so many gaps that are missing. And that is not just in one healthcare system like the UK, that's across the world, that's across the globe. So I sort of felt like, okay, we don't have enough data on this population, not only from diagnosis point of view and treatment point of view. That's probably where we've got them, well, minus the diagnosis pathway. But once someone's diagnosed to the end of treatment, that's actually where we probably have the most amount of data already available. But also I'm interested in knowing what happens in 10 years' time. When do symptoms of fibrosis first appear? When does a flap fail? Does it fail? Does it never fail?
Yeah.
When do you start? So, and also, like, how does this impact you on a socio-economic platform? So how has this impacted your marriage, your partnerships, your sexuality, your intimacy, your bank account, your pension, your,
The
you
things
know,
that nobody really talks about.
exactly. And obviously there will have to be a committee who will then decide what the priorities are, and hopefully we can get industry and researchers involved, and clinicians. Well, not hopefully, we'll have to get them involved. So we ask patients to share that data with us, and I would like the Young Tongues to be the guardians of this data, to make sure that it's then used to research all those different elements for, that us patients have to contend with,
Yeah.
where there are people who want to research these things, but where bigger data sets aren't available. And at the moment we're at 800 patients in terms of the group, and we've achieved that with word of mouth. We've not done any ads. We've not done any outreach to healthcare professionals, or very minimal. We've only just started really giving presentations at conferences and congresses and things like that. So we're actually still very undiscovered. And also, I need to say, not every young tongue cancer patient wants to join a support group. For a lot of, it can be quite intense. So then you have like the website as an alternative resource. So, but I just feel like we have the power to make such an impact. But now I'm going to give you the bombshell of all bombshells. Guess what?
Okay, I'm ready.
This costs an awful lot of money. And being a charity, and being a CEO and the founder of a charity for the first time in my life, never having done anything like this before, it is a very rude awakening. And so just for me to continue what we are doing at the moment, without growth in terms of having staff and all these special projects, it costs us about £45,000 a year.
Wow.
Because you say you're really busy, Barbara, you do so much. I do so much because I have a lot of tools that help me to do so much, and all those tools cost money. And also I achieve much because I go to different places, and I have to take a train to this meeting, because no one ever pays you to, they invite you to these fantastic places and then they never pay you to get there. So it mounts up. And even fundraising costs money, because you have to invest some to get something back. So it does really mount up. So we're going to really be playing out there, asking people in our community and in the wider tongue cancer community to fundraise for us, which is why we are so incredibly grateful that you are taking on the grueling challenge of running 100K. Very soon. I mean, is it this or next weekend?
It's not this Saturday. Next Saturday. For those that don't know, I'm taking on 100K in one day across the Cotswold Way for this wonderful charity. So if you want to follow on my social media page, or go on to Young Tongues and donate there, any donations, kind words of support to get me round will be mostly appreciated. But nervous, but I'm ready. I'm so ready.
You'll smash it. I have no doubt you'll smash it. And like I say, we were so grateful when you got in touch, and also the Society of British Dental Nurses to have us as your charity of the year, because we are so unknown and we are micro. Because 50 grand might sound like a lot of money, but actually in terms of bankrolling an organization, it's really just the beginning. So for us, my first priority obviously is to have a sustainable organization, that we can continue providing the services that we already do and improve them as we go along. And then it's to grow it. And that's the other thing. This is like a personal thing that I would really like to do. And I know it's harder than said, but I would really like to create employment opportunities for the community. So many of us, especially with speech impediments and other health barriers, find it so hard to get back into employment. And I want to shake employers sometimes, because I'm like, you don't know what you're missing out on here, this talent. So wouldn't it be amazing if we could create some opportunities for our community to actually get back into employment? And the same goes with the research stuff. Every time I speak to someone who's about to do research, I always say, look, even if your budget is small and you can't like afford to pay us Young Tongues to coordinate it for you, please put some money aside for patients. And as a rough rule, it's 25 quid an hour. That at the very least, that's every time you have an interaction with a patient, they're giving you a part of them. They are reliving something, and they're also giving you their expertise, which is so valuable. So so really, really important to create those opportunities for us as an organisation to be involved, but more importantly, actually, for our community of patients to have a bigger voice, and you know, have a stake in it, be reimbursed for their knowledge.
Absolutely. Well, from as far as the SBDN, like we would just always do a charity of the year, and we fell upon you and thought, this lady's amazing, like how can we help build that up and talk about you? And I've talked about you a lot, like in my area at work, and just to get you out there, and anything that we can do as a society to help you do that, then we're here to support you.
Thank you
as well. So
thank you so much. And
so I'm sure I can put your passion, and I know you're not going to stop. And it's like, yeah, girl.
So just to summarize, there are multiple ways you can support the Young Tongues. The first thing you can do is to go to our really old website and sign up to our mailer. And like that, you'll get lots of information. You get 4 automated emails, like in the first month, that just give you all the different informations of the different things we do. And make sure you tell us if you're a clinician or a researcher or a patient, because then we can keep it relevant. The second thing you can do is go and find us on social media. So to keep engaged, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn. We are also on TikTok, but on TikTok you mostly will only be exposed to our podcast. So LinkedIn and Instagram are really the 2 best places, and it's at Young Tongues Global. The third way to support us is to go and find Cheryl's Just Giving page and put in a couple of quid towards her 100k run. And then
I'll
also
tag it all in the show notes.
Absolutely. And then also, obviously, there's now 2 other ways to really support us. Is if you are a clinician and you work in the dental space or in other spaces, is to register your interest to come and volunteer for us. And don't worry, we're not going to take hours and hours of your time, but it might just be proofing something and then putting your name to it, saying that you've proved it. So and we're also not quite sure how we're going to do it yet. So but at this point in moment, we are just getting people to register their interest, to say, yes, I'd like to be involved. And the last way is, obviously, if you want to also do a crazy thing like Cheryl does, and maybe not run 100k, but maybe run a 5k, or do like a walk or a hike, or even bake some cake or make some cocktails.
Or cake.
We are always looking for people who would be willing to put on an event or do something to help us raise some money, because honestly, every single pound actually makes a huge impact for us.
Amazing. Barbara, thank you so much today. I feel like we could talk for hours.
Yeah, I have that effect, unfortunately.
I love it. No, honestly, thank you so much. And I hope everybody enjoys listening to this episode today. You'll be able to hear it on Spotify, on Apple podcast, and a little bit on TikTok as well. We're also growing on TikTok at the moment when I get the time, and YouTube as well. So do drop us some comments. We really do appreciate it. And again, do go along and give Young Tongues a follow and give them their support. So I hope everybody's enjoyed today's episode. I know I really have. So it's a goodbye from me. And Barbara, I'll give you the final word.
Thank you so much for sticking with me for this hour. It's been a delight, and I hope to meet you all at future events and conferences and via email and volunteering for us. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Barbara.
Bye.
Bye.